المشكلة إنه إحنا ظروف البلد صعبة.
ما في شغل بلبنان، ما في مستقبل، فبحس حالي فعلا بالسجن.
شو ممكن إحنا نعمله لنحسن أدائنا ومستوانا؟ كانوا عم بيقولوا يا ريت ينعمل شيء له علاقة بالطبيخ.
بدي كل شيء طيب عندي.
Amazing women have started their own catering company in a refugee camp in Lebanon. We're launching this Kickstarter campaign to buy a food truck.
Projects such as Mariam's improve our local community.
بتحسي بحالك أكثر، بتحسي بقيمتك أكثر، إنك أنت عم تعطي أكثر.
أول ما ولا مرة أنا طالعة متخيلة بهالوقت أنا بدي أتعلم السواقة. أبداً.
التجربة هي بتعطي للواحد أمل لقدام.
إحنا قدمنا كل ورقنا للنافعة محل ما بتتسجل التراك، بس لازم يمضيها وزير الداخلية.
There are a lot of obstacles, regulations and laws regarding these people. It's unjust for them.
هناك تشديد على إعطاء رخص العمل لغير اللبنانيين.
وقلت لك أنا كل الأوراق
أنت فوتر لك إياه من عندي، بده يكون عندك معك رخصة تقدر أعطيك إياها.
بضل الواحد قلقان. هول الستات متكلين على هالشي. كل لاجئ بحالة حلم، دائما بيحلموا بالحياة الأفضل.
For them, there is no plan B. Plan B is repeat plan A until it works out.
بحس إنه إحنا عم نعطي صرنا طاقة إيجابية لحدا تاني غيرنا.
النسوان بتقدر تجرب كل شيء، بتقدر تشتغل بأي شيء، وهلأ بالعصر اللي نحن فيه كل شيء عم تشتغل المرأة.
She's giving these people hope.
الإنسان لازم يكون شوي جريء وشجاع إنه يجرب.
نأمل إنه تكون الحياة أفضل في المستقبل.
Hello and a very warm welcome to all of you. It's great to have you all at the 7th edition of the Urban Lens Film Festival 2020. This is the first time we've gone online with the festival, and we're very happy to present films from 17 countries in 18 languages. It's heartening to see so many of you from so many corners of the world join us to watch films. We're delighted to kick off the first of many conversations at the festival with the discussion on a film called Soufra from Lebanon. I hope many of you have had a chance to watch it. If not, it's available till the 3rd of December on our festival website. A little bit about the film before we get into the discussion. Soufra follows the unlikely and wildly inspirational story of an intrepid social entrepreneur, Mariam, a generational refugee who has spent her entire life in a refugee camp south of Beirut in Lebanon. The film follows Mariam as she sets out to change her fate by launching a catering company called Soufra, and then expanded into a food truck business with a diverse team of fellow refugee women who now share this camp as their home. Together, they heal the wounds of war through the unifying power of food while taking their future into their own hands through an unrelenting belief in Mariam and in each other. In the process, Mariam is breaking barriers, pulling together Syrian, Iraqi, Palestinian, and Lebanese women to work side by side and form beautiful friendships while running this thriving business. Sufra will shine a new and revealing light on people inside of the largest refugee crisis in human history. But ultimately, this film is about hope, grit, passion, and the common bonds created by bringing people together around food as a bridge to overcome all barriers. Though Mariam is officially considered stateless, she is a beacon of hope and home for thousands upon thousands of women in the most unlikely of places. Mariam and her team will be just that for thousands more once her story is told through Soufra. A little bit about the director, Thomas, who has joined us today. Thomas Morgan is a film producer and director. His award-winning work includes Storied Streets and Waiting for Mamu. Thomas was also executive producer for India's Daughter, which received the Peabody Award for Journalism and the Emmy-nominated film called Silenced. He is the co-founder of Rebel House, a studio, a Los Angeles-based film production company. He received his honorary doctorate degree from his alma mater, the Central Michigan University, and teaches documentary filmmaking to young students. Sandhya Kumar, who will be in conversation with Thomas, is a film and communications graduate from the San Francisco Art Institute and Jamia Millia University in New Delhi. Sandhya Kumar is inspired by the desire to make visible the poetry of everyday life. Her 2012 documentary, Oh Friend, This Waiting, won the Indian National Award for Best Arts and Cultural Film for its unconventional exploration of the Devdasi tradition in South India through the medium of love poetry. She has received film grants from the India Foundation of the Arts and the Public Service Broadcasting Trust, and has been an ARTSA Fellow at Art Think South Asia. She is a trustee of Vikalp Bangalore, a filmmakers collective committed to creating platforms for documentary films to reach wider audiences. She also conducts workshops and training sessions on the filmmaking process for learners of all levels. Thank you very much, Sandhya, for doing this for us, and Thomas for joining us so early in the morning. Over to you both.
Thank you, Yasho.
Thank you.
So first of all, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Urban Lens. Thank you, IIHS, for bringing such a wonderful lineup of films for us that this time we can watch from the comfort of our living rooms and bedrooms. We have people like Thomas Morgan joining us from Salt Lake City, Utah. It's like some 6:30 in the morning for him, and there he is with his cup of coffee waiting to chat with us. So hi, Thomas.
Thank you for having me. Yes, very good. I'm happy to be here.
Thomas, thanks so much for sharing this very, very heartwarming film, Soufra, and the journey of Mariam. When I first started seeing the film, I realized that Lebanon has so much in common with India. Just even the architecture of the camp, the architecture of the city, we have small houses, narrow lanes, crisscrossing wires, status of women, unemployment, struggling for better opportunities, bureaucracy, struggling to get permits, licenses, and our love for food. So I guess fully related to the story of what's happening in Lebanon. But first of all, I'd like to begin with what I feel is the core of this film. What I feel is the core of this film, which is women and hope. When I was watching the film, I kept thinking about how John Berger had written that when you have nothing to lose, when you have nothing at all, then the only thing you have and you hold between your teeth is hope. And he talks this and he says this about Palestinian women. And I was about Palestinian refugees. And I was thinking it's the very same feeling that I kept getting throughout the film. So you know what Mariam says, that a lot of women in the camp have never left the house. They think of themselves as mothers first, then wives, and maybe last as women. And I think that's very true of almost in India and a lot of the non-Western world. My first question is that what do you think makes Mariam who she is?
I think it is her mother. I think her mother is a very strong, opinionated woman. I think that also, for Mariam, she just has this kind of inner spirit that we can do better. And I think what's really the thing that kind of made me gravitate to this story is that it's never about her. It's always about her community. It's always about the greater good. She started this kitchen, and she's the only one that doesn't cook. She doesn't know how to cook. She started a food truck, and she didn't know how to drive. So all of these things were about what can I do for the improvement of the community. And I think because of that, she gained strength from seeing small successes in her community. That for her is, that is the goal. And it's not, it's not that they're going to make these giant steps. They're going to make many small steps in succession until they get there, and I just think, once she has had a little bit of exposure and left the camp and saw what might be possible, it made everything possible. And then it was, how do I bring this to my community? How do I bring this to these women? And so she's quite inspiring.
How did you hear about her first, and how did you start making this film?
Yeah, I was supposed to, years ago, I was supposed to do a film in Libya about a girls' school that was opening in Libya that would be free for girls to go, which was at the time, unheard of. And so then kind of all of the political unrest occurred in Libya, and I couldn't go. But I told the woman who had contacted me from the NGO, I said, if you ever hear of another great story, please let me know. I would love to do something. And she called me one day, 2 years later, kind of out of nowhere, and said, I have this story. It's about this woman. She's starting a food truck. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, and by the way, she's lived her entire life inside a refugee camp, and her mother's lived there her whole life. And, she started going on. And I was like, oh, I have to do this. So I think literally 3 weeks later, I flew to Beirut and tried to figure out how am I going to assemble some crew or something to start capturing the story. And you'll see at in the beginning when they're doing the piece about the Kickstarter campaign, the footage looks different because it was everything I could assemble at the time. The camera wasn't great, the sound wasn't great. It was just kind of whatever we could pull together because it was happening in real time. And then I followed her for a little over 2 years, I guess.
So, this film has an amazing number of positives. Here is somebody who decides to start dreaming with a small dream, sets up a catering company, starts catering in a school, starts catering for house parties, gets to be a pop-up chef in a restaurant, is able to buy her food truck. So at what point did you enter this story, and did you know what way it was going to end? And
no, we were there at the very.
Know how it's going to end. So yeah.
They had started the small catering company, and mostly it was inside the camp.
Yes.
And then when they did go outside the camp, if you can imagine, it would be 3 women would be sitting in an illegal taxi most of the time, holding all of the food on their laps to cater outside because they had no way to get it there. And so it was when they decided that maybe they could try to start something bigger. Maybe they would try to start a food truck that I got involved. And then from that point, all the way through this process, I thought, oh, this will be a great story. It'll be, 6 months, I'll be, done. And it just kept going. And I think for the first time for me, it exposed me to really the difficulties beyond just living, shelter and food, the difficulties of being stateless. I think for the first time I recognized what that really means when you see that they have no rights to open a business. They really have no rights as a citizen. They, to leave the camp is a big deal, and they feel unsafe because they know that whatever happens to them potentially isn't going to be looked at in the same eyes of the law as they would if they were a citizen. And so I think there's so many things that it was really eye-opening. And honestly, when I got to the camp, I expected to see tents. So when I saw this, this kind of construction and pulled together pieces and parts that made this camp, I was really taken aback by all of that.
Mm-hmm. And but did it at some point? Did you kind of had to abandon the filmmaking? Like, what happens? I mean, she waited 1.5 years almost to get the license. So, what is it as a filmmaker that keeps you going? I mean, we all know a lot of things keep Mariam going. Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, I get so invested in the films, but I get so invested in the people. And so, it's hard for me to not inject myself and try to help, and try to be part of a solution as a filmmaker. I think that's that restraint is most difficult. But I also just, I don't know. I think there's something about the underdog. There's something about the people who struggle for the very things that we all take for granted that I'm attracted to. And so when she's struggling and she's working and trying to make this happen, I just kept thinking to myself, strangely, like there's part of all of us in this character. There's part of all of us in this subject, and those are the stories I'd like to tell. So what's difficult in the documentary is, I'm sure is people want to see big stories. They want to see stories of celebrities, or they want to see stories of, CEOs, or they want to see stories of people who, ridiculous things happen to, or whatever. And for me, these small stories, these small personal stories where you see yourself are far more compelling. And I hope it is for an audience as well.
As you say that, I want to take a step outside of Soufra, put on a wide angle lens and say that you have a background, you have a corporate background. You did investment banking for many years and you were in real estate. And then you got into documentary filmmaking. And actually, I haven't seen all of your other films, but reading about them, I really get this sense of what you're saying, where you're attracted to the underdog.
Right.
I want to just talk a little bit about some of your other films where you made Storied Streets, which was about homelessness in the US, Waiting for Mamu, which is about getting children who've been in prisons in Nepal, getting them out and giving them a free life. So how do you choose these stories? I mean, they're stories in countries which are alien to you, languages that are alien to you. How do you start the process of choosing a story and bringing it to screen?
That's a really difficult question, because I think some of the times it's never really planned the way you think it would be planned. Sometimes I hear a story and I have so many people who will come and say, what you should do, and like that. For me, those are I always say, you should make that film. That sounds great. But I think, when I find something where I really feel like it's somebody who's going to do something amazing, and it's going to, and I can lend this megaphone to their cause and to their issue and to their victory or defeat, I think, and bring it to the forefront. Like, those are what really attract me. And I will say, most of the time, if you're going to bet on a film like Sufra or a film like Waiting for Mamu, it tends to be the women who will stick with their community. They won't give up. They will continue for the betterment of the kids, or for the, and not just for themselves. And so, people have asked me before, why do you make so many films about women? And it's simply because I have to bet on somebody I think will get to the finish line, whatever that finish line looks like, and won't give up. And that typically is women who are completely and fully invested in their communities.
Isn't it amazing? I'm so happy to hear you say that. Yes, I 100% agree with you on that. I had
and if she's not willing to give up, then I'm not willing to give up filming either. I will keep going as long as she keeps going. So,
not just Mariam. I mean, even all the other chefs that you have featured in Sufra that comes through. One of them has 4 children. She tried to send them on a plane and they couldn't get through. Just everyone aiming to get a better life for their children. And I think what really comes through Soufra is that just give these women a sisterhood, empower them with a sisterhood where they find commonalities, where they find women understand each other, and they can go so far, so far. I think it's really the most inspiring thing I've seen in a very long time.
Thank you. Thank you.
I was curious about the crew you put together. When I saw the film, I thought you would have done a lot of filming and maybe have a crew A and a crew B. But then I saw in credits, you only had one cinematographer, Johnny Karam, and who was Lebanese and Canadian. And then you used an Egyptian editor, Egyptian origin. So is that a conscious decision to work with people who help with the language, or do you put in a different crew for each film?
Yeah, so I think, you know, part of it is just the rapport that you have with that person. You know, I think so strangely, the way that I got my crew is when I first went to Beirut, I didn't have anything, but Mariam was starting, kind of with or without me, she was going to start this Kickstarter campaign. And so I got there, and it was during, I don't know if you remember this, but they used to have all these protests around the garbage protests and the trash that they had lined up in the streets. And so I went down to one of these protests, and they were shooting the water cannons and all this stuff. And I invited all of the media to come back to my Airbnb for drinks. I just thought, you know, I need to find people. And so a lot of them came back, and I said, look, I'm looking for a crew. I'm looking for people to make this film with me. And this one woman, Daisy Moore, said, you know, I can help you. She spoke very, you know, she's Dutch and had been living there for 20 years. And she said, I can help you. And so she put together, you know, she introduced me to Johnny, who I still stay in touch with Johnny. He's like one of my favorite people in the world. And Bashir, who did our sound. And then we just had this very small crew. But it was also important for me that crew was able to establish a rapport with the women. So I didn't want to change once they had a rapport where the women knew who they were and they trusted them. Because I think, especially in this film, trust was hard to gain. It took a long time to get everybody to kind of open up. I mean, here I am, an American man who just shows up in the middle of a camp, and they don't know why I'm there or what my intentions are, even though they knew what had happened with my other films. And so once I had that, and once I felt like our crew had that, I didn't want to change that. So I stuck with that very small crew. And it also allowed us to get around and film a lot in Beirut, which is very difficult with the government regulations. So yeah, but I always try to hire local. I always try to hire as many local as I can. I think it's good for the economy. It's good for me because the culture and the language. I mean, I think it's just better. I think, and I also feel like it brings opportunity. So not just to Mariam, but to, you know, Johnny, this is the first feature film he ever shot. He had shot for a long time on news and all of that. And I think it was exciting for him to be able to be part of a feature film. And I literally wanted him to be creative as well. I didn't want to over direct or, you know, to stifle him in any way, because he knew things, especially when people were speaking, he knew what they were saying, you know, more intimately than I did. And so he kind of got to pick and choose some of the shots as well. So it was a great relationship.
Did he also do some shooting without you?
Yeah, so I would go back and forth. I was living in Singapore at the time, and so I would go back and forth. And if something occurred, though, then Johnny would run over there, and then I would book a flight and get there as fast as I could. So there were several times where, especially B-roll and some of those kind of other moments that he was there and available. But yeah, so it was a good team effort for sure. And then with the editor, I was really fortunate to get Mohammed. He had done The Square and has really done like some amazing films, and Emmy Award winning and Academy Award nominated. And so we'd gone through and tried to do it without an Arab speaking editor at first, to try to do it through translation, and it just wasn't working. And so when he came available, we were really lucky. He's a ridiculous editor. He's so good, so good.
Very well edited. I love the opening sequence where the credits are rolling, and it just sets the tone for how you're going to receive the rest of the film.
Yeah,
beautiful.
The food makes me happy.
Yeah, I know. I was so I went back, and when I was looking at your website, I was thrilled to see that you have a Soufra cookbook as well. And,
yes.
And I'm very impressed, Thomas, to see that that's actually been your way of working, where it's not just the film in which you bring a story to life on screen, but you've left some kind of lasting, tangible impact. With Waiting for Mamu, you've helped create this butterfly school. Here, you've helped create the cookbook, and proceeds from the cookbook are going towards the school and the camp. So
yeah, I think that for me,
organically, or yeah.
Yeah, so for me, it's the film is always the vehicle to get to that. piece, right? And so I always ask, like, if you could have, I said to Mariam, I said, if you could have anything, what would you have? You know, and inevitably, whoever it is will give you something that's very selfless and what they want for the betterment of the community. And so she had said that they wanted a school inside the camp, which we were told would never be done. There's no address, no one's going to fund this. There's no deed to be able to identify the property, and we got it done. And same with Waiting for Mamu. You know, we built the butterfly home, and then we lost half of it during the earthquake in 2015, and then we went back and rebuilt it in 2 emergency shelters in the U.S. But like for me, like that is the prize, right? So I don't keep any of the trophies or any of the awards that come with the films. I give those all to the people who the film is about. The only thing I keep is that picture of this is what this film achieved. We built this, you know, and I don't mean this like us, like our crew. I mean the community of us. So, you know, whoever watched the film and gave time and maybe hosted screenings or participated in some way, and those for me those are the best. Like you know, when at the end of your life, no one's going to recognize, oh, you won an award at this film festival. What they are going to recognize is how you were able to positively influence somebody halfway around the world who didn't know you from, you know, anybody when you started, and suddenly you have this friendship and this relationship that's quite beautiful.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's one of the huge plus points of being a filmmaker, the relationships you build, the impacts you can create. So yeah, very inspiring. I'm just sidely curious how you got Susan Sarandon to come on as executive producer.
I never went to film school. I didn't know anything about making film other than I loved to watch film when I first started. I watched it in a way that I think was maybe different from most people. I would literally take notes. Sometimes I would, you know, try to figure out how long a scene should be by how many times people spoke back and forth and so on. And so I had come across this issue of homelessness in the United States, and I ended up in New York at an event, and this event happened to be for a lot of people who were celebrities, and I had a, you know, kind of a chance meeting with Susan Sarandon and another filmmaker, a guy named Morgan Spurlock, who did Supersize Me and other films. You know, told Susan, I told him about homelessness, and he said, you should make that film. And, you know, I wasn't a filmmaker, but I was really curious as to what could happen if, you know, if somebody undertook this and what could be done. And so he told Susan, hey, Thomas is going to make a film about homelessness in the United States. And she said, how do I help you? And so I kind of jokingly said, well, you can be, you know, the executive producer, or, you know, maybe do some voiceover or something. And she said, okay. And so I went home and told my wife, I said, I know this sounds crazy, but I want to quit my job. I want to downsize our entire lives, and I want to do this. And I was fully expecting for her to say no. And she was like, of course. She said, how are we going to tell our kids to chase their dreams if you're not willing to chase yours? So I think, you know, that at that moment, I kind of was like, and I look back now and it just seems so ridiculous that I did that, you know, but Susan has been a friend, and she's been an executive producer on my films ever since. She's very much involved. She knows my kids, she knows our family, and she's been a real champion of the women that I've made films about, of the causes that, you know, she's gone to Nepal after the earthquake. She was there. She went to Beirut and saw the school after we built that, and was there for a screening with Ben Stiller. And, you know, she's been a real champion of these causes. And I think our relationship is not so much around the films, it's around what can we do with them. And so she's just that kind of human being. And I'm very, very fortunate that she's been so generous in her time and her friendship.
And so what's happening next with the women of Soufra? I'm curious how they reacted to the film. And
so I took my whole family. We screened the film inside the camp, and it was funny because if it was their piece, they would walk out of the room because they didn't want to watch themselves. They would walk back in after, and so my kids were there, and we screened the film. It was really great, and you know, we got the school built, and I think they became kind of I don't want to say celeb, but kind of these cause celebs, you know, where their business picked up, their catering picked up, and they were doing quite well. And then, you know, obviously with COVID, and then in Beirut, there was that explosion that really took down so much of the city recently. And what's interesting is, you know, these people who at one point, you know, couldn't be, you know, couldn't have the right to own the food truck, couldn't have the right to own the business, were kind of shunned by the rest of the community, found themselves being the ones who were taking the food out and finding the people who were displaced because of the explosion, finding the people who had struggled because of COVID and couldn't come out, and delivering meals. And so they became the caretakers, which is really amazing because, you know, no one had ever done that for them. But I think that speaks volumes about the kind of people they are. But they're all doing well. They're all doing well.
And has Mariam managed to have more food trucks across Lebanon?
No, you know, she hasn't. I think, in fact, her catering business picked up so much that she uses the food truck a lot as a vehicle to cater. And, you know, I think, you know, the other thing too is once they converted the truck to the food truck, then Mariam wasn't allowed to drive it anymore, because you're not allowed to drive a commercial vehicle if you're a refugee. And so the guy who taught her how to drive is now the driver of the truck. So he drives for them. But
another job opportunity. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. But it was fascinating to see a woman who had never driven before decide that she was going to start a food truck. I didn't realize at the time that she didn't drive. And so when she went to learn how to drive, it was quite interesting.
You know, Thomas, the film is inspirational at so many levels. I think it's, you know, not possible to even talk about all these things. But yeah, when you said what you're saying, I could not believe it. Like, she's learning to drive and she's aiming to drive a food truck as soon as she learns how to start driving. It's amazing. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it was great.
I think we'll continue talking. Let's take in a few questions that have come in.
Sure.
There's a comment. Let's take this comment from Reena Mohan. She says, really lovely film, very heartwarming story of grit and determination in sad and desperate circumstances. Congratulations. Reena is one of the top editors, documentary editors in our country. She lives in Delhi.
Great.
Then here, Subhashri says, hi Thomas, thank you for Soufra. Apart from this film, lots of your films are from contexts very different from yours. I'm curious, given your own cultural and geographical context, what kind of lens do you work with for each film? What's the negotiation like? Would like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think the one thing I am good at is I'm good at the relationship part. You know, I'm good at like kind of meeting people and humbling myself to kind of tell my story and to tell them that, you know, I'm not the expert, but I will do everything I can to help you. And I think for me, it takes a little while, but that's always been my skill set. My skill set has always been on the relationship side. I'm also very emotional. So if somebody starts telling me a story, I will start crying. If you start telling me a sad story right now, I mean, and I don't feel bad about that at all. And I think it's that that vulnerability a lot of times on both sides that kind of gets you to that point where you really are able to establish relationships that are lasting. And everybody who's in my film, I still have relationships with. So, you know, as I make more films, it gets harder and harder. Yeah, thank God for social media and, you know, time zone changes and Facebook messaging and whatever. But I think, you know, for me, I think it's all about that relationship. And if I never made the film, I would be grateful for the relationship that I have. So I think that's always, if I put that first and I put what they're trying to do first, and then the film is kind of the afterthought, like I was there and able to capture all of this, and it's something that they're proud of, most importantly, and doesn't put them in jeopardy in any way or in harm's way or in, you know.
Has there ever been a situation where you've gotten involved with a subject and gotten involved with an issue and then not ended up making the film you had in mind?
Well, yes. So there was a film about human trafficking in the United States that I was working on, and we had to kind of put that on pause for a while because I felt like, there were a number of issues, but you know, there was also a point in which I felt like it wasn't going in the direction that was good for a lot of reasons, wasn't good for the person who was kind of the subject of the film. And so I kind of backed away and thought, well, we'll just wait, you know. But if it never came back, I feel like I did the right thing, you know. So I think it's always has to be that first. It always has to be the people first, and then your art, you know, second. But you also, I also rarely will you hear my voice in the film, because I don't want to tell through my lens. I don't want to tell somebody else's story, because I'm so not, you know, I don't understand all of the time. And so letting them tell their true and authentic story without me interpreting through my, you know, my white male American lens, I think is what I owe them in telling their story.
As you say this, one of the points which struck me about the film is the opening narrative, which is in Mariam's voice. And she comes across as so articulate, so eloquent and philosophical. I actually was wondering that, did you help her write a narrative, or is this just those, you know, voiceover that was culled out of the interview that was done with her?
No, she was so articulate about all of the situations and all of the things, and again, like for I had some people who said, well, you should have told kind of the history of how they ended up there. And I said, but that's not Miriam's story. She doesn't dwell on that. She doesn't spend time talking about how they ended up in this camp, you know. And so I think it's not just telling the story that it is her story, but it's also in a way that she would want it told, if that makes sense. So you know, she is very articulate about the camp and the needs of the camp and how they, you know, how people feel. And she's kind of like the mayor of the camp. Everybody knows who she is, you know. Everybody is okay with whatever big idea she has next. And so I really wanted to have that come through in the film, but also her attitude, you know, this attitude of hope and this attitude of, you know, just, I guess, this relentless pursuit of something better. I wanted all of those things to kind of come through in the film that we made, because that's her.
But she also came across as a very private person. Like, I was left wanting to know a little bit more about her personal thoughts and this attitude.
Yeah, I think she doesn't like the spotlight on her. She wants, you know, she kept saying like this, I thought this film was going to be about all the women. And we're like, it is about all of the women, but all the women come to you. So this is how, you know, you end up here. But also funny story is when we filmed the Kickstarter campaign, when she was starting that, and we filmed, she thought that was it. She thought we were all done. We were there for like half a day, and she thought that was the whole movie was going to be made in a half a day.
Yeah.
So like the fact that we kept coming back was really funny, and the food was amazing. Every time we came back, there'd be these big spreads of food, and it was just like me and Johnny and Bashir, right? The three of us, and we'd be like, "Who's all the food for?" "Oh, it's for you." So that was fantastic. But yeah, I think she is very private in so many ways, but in so many ways, she also understands that part of her helping and part of her making this successful for all of these women is, you know, letting go of some of that privacy and letting people come in and letting them see and have this experience. And you know, the fact that she let us into her home with her mom and you know, all of that, like, and there were times where I felt like I didn't want to film. I didn't want to take away from those moments that were very personal to her. And so, you know, with her mother or with her father or with, you know, one of her sisters or whatever, that we just put the camera down and we're just okay to sit in that moment, you know, and let it go. So,
you know, Thomas, it makes me so happy to hear these ethics of documentary filmmaking that we are discussing, because I often feel that people really just go for the subject and try to milk the most they can get. And it's really, just want to say that it's really heartening to hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it always, maybe doesn't make the most successful film, because maybe those moments are what people yearn to see, but it doesn't matter to me. Like it's okay. I mean, we can make great films without necessarily getting involved, so involved in people's lives that we make them feel uncomfortable. And at the end of the day, you know, if she's not proud of the film that we make, if she's not proud of the work that we've done, then I've done a tremendous injustice to the reason that I set out to tell the story in the first place. So, you know, that was always at the forefront of my mind. Like, what makes them proud? What is the story that they would like to see told? And how would I tell it in a way that honors them?
Can I ask another question? Somebody asks, there was so much trauma in the place that you were shooting. We see some of it in the film, but Soufra is mostly about hope, resilience, and dreams. How did you navigate through the emotions? Could you talk about the structuring of the film and what shots you decided to leave out?
Yeah, so I think, you know, inside the camp, what was interesting to me is when you get there, it's suffocating. The walls are very tight. You know, everything's so close in. It's uncomfortable, and then not speaking the language makes it more uncomfortable, and it's loud. And but that's their normal, you know. So I kind of I didn't want to exploit that. I wanted it to blend in the way it blends into their, like, one of those things where after a while you're kind of watching and you're like, you forget that you're in this camp, because it is their normal. There were some things that did leave out. There was one story that this guy told that it was so beautiful, and he lent the story to us, that he was telling us he came to this camp when he was 10 years old, and his dad said that he would be here for 10 days. He said that was 70 years ago, and he still has the key to the house that no longer exists back in Palestine, that he still holds on to that key, and that sense of hope, you know, that someday they will not be there, you know. And I think that spirit is kind of that sense of hope is resonates throughout the camp, that one day we won't be here anymore, you know, one day things will be different. And you know, that was hard, because I kept trying to figure out where could I use this, but it just didn't fit Mariam's narrative, and so we didn't use it. But that was probably the most difficult for me, because I really tried to figure out a way to cram it in there, because I just thought he was so eloquent in the way that he told it. He was so beautiful in the way that he told it, and it was just so well shot. And I was just like, oh, I wish we could make that work.
There's a related question from Mohit, who says, hi Thomas, could you please share any anecdote of shooting Soufra? Any difficulties you had to face to shoot your film in a refugee camp?
Well, I think the key to shooting in the camp was really Mariam, and because everybody knew her, like, people would look at you and then they saw you were with Mariam and suddenly it was okay, right? Like, she has that kind of relationship to people in the camp.
Respect.
Yeah, I think that, interestingly, I had gotten there in the day that they went to the farmers market. The day before that, there was a suicide bombing not far from their camp, like enough that you could feel the explosion, you know, and they put up all of these barricades to keep people. In fact, none of the men were allowed to leave the camp. Only the women were allowed to leave the camp. So here they are trying to get to this farmer's market for the first time, right? And they're trying to get all of this food out, and they're in these illegal taxis trying to get the food to the market.
What do you mean taxis? You said that earlier also, meaning they don't have a license to be a taxi.
No, there's no license. In fact, if they did have a license, they probably wouldn't pick them up. I don't know why. It's kind of the stigma of being a refugee. And so they're just people who are driving their cars and will pull over and pick people up, you know. So they get there, they finally, after 5 checkpoints, right, they get to the farmer's market. And then the first response from the man running the market is, why are you so late? You know, we gave you this table in the back because you couldn't be here on time. Like as if there was some kind of irresponsible behavior that they were taking part in. I just thought, this is their lives, you know, this is their lives. And they were so thankful. Even so, they were so thankful to be there. They were so thankful that they had this opportunity to kind of put their business out there in the public. And it was just like, there was so many emotions like in me at the time. Like I wanted to scold the guy myself and tell him, what are you talking about? Like, do you know how hard it was to get? They never said a word. It was just like, you know, they just kind of went along. And about their business. So I think there were so many moments like that that I was just so in awe of their
That
patience.
comes through very poignantly and very powerfully. Like you see a lot of this emotion that you're talking on their faces. They look nervous. They're not sure how people are going to receive them. People are coming and asking, is this chicken? Does this have this? And it's
Right. Right. And I think also the juxtaposition to see that camp and then to see them going into these beautiful homes and serving people, in places that they never expected to be. I think it was just quite eye-opening.
It looks like different countries.
Yes, absolutely.
But we see that in India as well. Okay, we come to, someone has a very specific question where they say, from Nabina Chakrabarti, she says, could you please speak something more about the scene where Miriam was rejected by the truck seller initially and she asks to stop filming? Yes.
So she went there fully intending to get the truck. She thought she had all of the paperwork and was ready, to go. And so when she did get there, and she sat down and she presented all the paperwork, I think she was kind of taken back by the fact that there was any question at all, and in her mind, I think she went there thinking this will be this beautiful conclusion, right, of all of this work. And I think that Johnny did a great job of capturing that, because you kind of see the back and forth, and to think, if you think about that scene, it's all shot on one camera, right? Yeah. So he's showing these, this interaction between the two and all of these things and trying not to be intrusive. But that was the only time where I felt like Mariam was going to get emotional. And that's when she said, can you please turn off the camera? Because I think at that point, like she just didn't know if she could hold it together. And she never wanted to cry on camera, or she never wanted to be upset on camera. And though she displayed all of her emotions on her face, like she couldn't hide her emotions. There's so many times we didn't have to say anything. You just look at her face and you know exactly how she feels. So I think that was just such a daunting time for her, and just so overpowering. And we did shut off the camera, obviously, and then we turned it back on, and we asked her afterwards. And it took a long time for her to come back from that. We took a little break for a couple of months before we came back to shooting, because I really do think it wasn't just regrouping to come up with a plan to get the truck. I think it was also, I think she took that very personally. Mm-hmm. And I think that was the first time where she felt like, maybe we're not going to get there, And what, interestingly, at the end of the film, we were talking after the cameras are all shut off and we're all done. And she said to me, I don't know if I would have continued had you not been here making the film. I just didn't want anybody to see me like that. And I just thought, that's really an interesting, power of film. Because we're filming, you continue, but I was only continuing because she was continuing. So, I think together we got there.
And she spoke English as well.
Yeah, when we first started, she hardly spoke any English. And she said, you learn Arabic, I will learn English. That was the deal, right? So when we first started, by the end, her English was impeccable. My Arabic, I know 5 words. I'm terrible. Because when I went there, everybody wanted to practice their English speaking to me. So I never spoke any Arabic.
And they speak French as well. I guess many speak French.
Yes. So so it was interesting. But her English is very good. But she still, if given the opportunity, she'll still speak Arabic as opposed to English.
Yes.
We also have this funny clip, and I'll send it. And you guys can do whatever you want with it. But after the film, so Kamal, what is George Clooney's wife's name? So they're doing a lot of work with refugees and in and out of Lebanon. And so I said to her, I asked her a question. I said, well, what will it be like because we were trying to contact George Clooney to come onto the film, right, to help us get the school built. And I said, what will it be like to work with George Clooney? And her face gets so red, and she just starts laughing and laughing. Oh my God, George Clooney. And she just keeps saying George Clooney over and over again. And it's like this first time where you see almost like this westernized Mariam in a funny way, like the people that we look up to and admire as celebrities. She does as well. And I think it was like this really funny moment where you just see her in this really giggly and, I don't know, a bit embarrassing way that was just so, I don't know, it was really heartwarming. I still go back and watch that clip sometimes just for fun because it makes me laugh.
Do send it. Yeah.
Yeah, I will.
There's one more question which talks about the soundscape and the music, choice of music in the film.
Yeah. So Alex Seaver, he's actually a DJ and a very a well-respected artist in the U.S. His DJ name or whatever is called Mako, M-A-K-O, Mako Music, and so he's a Juilliard trained musician, and he has basically done all of my films for whatever money I had left, because he's so invested in the causes. And so he and another guy named Ken Joseph, who's amazing, together they put all of the score together for the film. And it was just kind of us trying to explain the emotion because I couldn't explain the music that I wanted. And then I think he just so brilliantly was tying pieces together with kind of the same undertone and tonality from piece to piece that, I mean, I was really proud of the score. We have had so many people who have talked about how great the score was, and that makes me, I think because it just drives the film as well, and it brings each one of those moments to a more personal level. So they're brilliant guys. Between him and Ken, they're really amazing. And so I've used them for Storied Streets and Mamu and the MasterCard stuff, and I mean all of these things. They're my kind of go-to.
I feel music brings in that element of fiction to documentary. Like so much of the emotion is controlled and steered with the music. So if you get good music, it's really great.
And I think music is kind of the last thing you think of because you can't really afford to think of it before. And so I think like with them, the fact that especially with Alex, who's been with me the whole time, well, and Ken, the fact that they're willing to do it because they just want to be a part of a story that's so important. And not, even when you're not able to pay them the way they should be paid, they're okay with that because they feel like they're invested as well. And so that's really amazing that they step up.
Good to hear that, yeah. We have one more question from Swati Sharan, a very specific question about logistics. She said, did you start making the film with funding? And over the 2 years, how many schedules did you shoot?
So I've never started a film with funding. I've always had to use my own money, which I will tell you in my house makes it a little more difficult because nobody's happy about that. But and I always feel like once we can get the picture going and you can start actually showing images, then the funding will come because people see that it's real and then they feel invested in the story. I couldn't articulate it in a way that would make people feel that emotional about the story. So I kind of always start without any funding and then try to gather the funding as I go. There's the schedule's out the window. There's no we would start shooting and then we would shoot for a while and then the first 6 months, I would say there's only maybe 2 minutes in the first 6 months that we used because everybody was so rigid and it took that long to have a relationship that made people trust that you were kind of there for all the right reasons. And there was a moment very specifically that I remember where I felt like it was so empowering and it just seemed so silly, but I'm like standing there at the time crying, watching this, where there was a form that they needed to fill out, a release form to be in the film, right? And so I asked for their release and they're all just standing there, and you could just tell, like some of the women are looking at each other, like, do we sign this? Do we have to go home and ask our husbands? So can we, like all of that. And so Mariam walks up and she signs the form and then she just kind of looks back at all of the rest of these women and they stood there, they looked at her for a second and then one by one they went up and they signed the form. And it was just such a strange but liberating, I think, act for them at the time. Like, yes, we're going to do this. We're going to tell this story to the world. Like again, I just get like emotional talking about it now. It's just such a beautiful, And of course, not captured on film or anything. It was just one of those moments where I just felt like, this is why I do this. You know, this is why I'm in this business. So it was great.
Thanks, Thomas. Yasho, are there any more questions?
No, I think we've taken most of them. They're along the same lines. So I think we're good. Thank you so much, Sandhya. Thank you so much, Thomas,
Thank you.
for not only sharing your film with us, but also joining us today. We hope to see you in India sometime. Whenever you're here, do look us up. Thanks, Sandhya, for graciously accepting to do this conversation. It's always lovely to have you at the festival. Thanks to everyone in the audience for participating. Our next conversation is at 5 p.m. IST tomorrow. Reema Kaur and Shashank Walia will be in conversation with Hansa Thaplial about their film Somewhere Nowhere. So I hope to see you all there. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I want to add before everyone leaves that if you can, do try and get a copy of the cookbook. It's on Amazon, or otherwise, like I did, you might get 3 or 4 recipes sent to you if you just click on the website. So do go join the website to keep getting updates from the wonderful Mariam and her Soufra team. And thank you, Thomas. It's been a
Thank you very much.
joy and pleasure. Thank you.